Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 Quick Match gameplay. This time around we are playing as the courageous Dowie against the filthy Skaven on MP Blue Ridge River, so definitely kind of doesn't really look like home turf for either of these two factions, but this time around for my build I do think this is a matchup that's generally pretty favorable to the stunties. There are some things Skaven can do to make your life miserable, but I figured, might as well try something a little different. Normally I do run with, say, Iron Breakers or units like that, and go with a bit more of, I'd say, conventional Dwarven build, but I decided to try something with a lot of artillery, try some Iron Drakes, and fairly cheap front line, and just see what would happen. For my Lord, I did bring a Rune Lord, and I think the Rune Lord is often a great pick, especially on his Anvil of Doom, just because he gives you that locus of power, 15% magic resistance, which is huge, especially against a faction like, say, Skaven, who has a lot of artillery, as you can see my opponent here, with a massive arty park. All of that artillery does magic damage, which that plus 15% magic resistance does mean that, for example, your cannons are going to be much tankier in, say, an artillery duel. The Rune Lord also does provide an AoE missile resist with the Rune of Grungni, and of course he has a whole bunch of buffs and debuffs, and of course the Skaven also do kind of rely on magic damage for some of their armor piercing. There's a good chance you'll see Censer Bearers who of course do magic damage. Skrulk of course is magic damage. All the sorts of priests mounted on plague furnaces and screaming bells, they all do magic damage. So against all of that, that extra magic resistance is incredibly valuable for the stunties. And of course, then the Rune Lord is fairly cheap, and he does provide all his, of course, activatable runes. Well, Skaven often will not bring that much AP, so Master Rune of Oath and Steel is useful. Master Rune of Wrath and Rune, of course, very good, and Master Rune of Negation. Master Rune of Oath and Steel does have the additional benefit of if your opponent decides to come in with Withering, you can counteract it by hitting plus 60 armor, at least for a few seconds. So regardless, I brought the Rune Lord, great anchor unit in this matchup, I think. A Thane, who is coming in with... I don't think the Thane's very good in most matchups, but in this matchup I think he'd be okay, especially because he does have the Ironbeard's Ring, which is plus 22% weakness to fire, which, with my pack of Iron Drakes here, I figured could be pretty useful, and it also does synergize with the Warriors of Dragonfire Pass, who he's going to be marching into battle with. Alongside that, we do have 4 units of Longbeards, vanilla variant. You don't really need anything fancy against Skaven. The only Skaven unit that'll really give these guys trouble, especially with that huge magic resistance coming in from the Rune Lord, is going to be Stormvermin, and I think my opponent did bring 3 of them here, so that could have definitely proved to be a bit of a challenge. Now, the main gun battery here, of course, 2 cannons. These guys are they're not the most amazing artillery piece ever, I don't think, but for their cost, they're pretty good, and more importantly, here they've got the benefit of the Master Engineer, who is providing the plus 18% accuracy buff through the Prospector Spyglass. He's got ballistics calibration, as well as entrenchment. And while entrenchment might not seem very good because it's basically a self-net, when you're firing in an artillery duel, which is really what I was bringing these guys for early game sniping, it can actually be incredibly valuable. Plus 40% AP missile damage on cannons is huge. Cannons, if you check their damage stats, they're already sitting at around 336, and it buffs them up through the roof. It buffs them to like over 400. 2 Slayers providing backline coverage. These guys are basically good enough to deal with anything the Skaven might bring. If my opponent brings a Doom Wheel, I'd have to snipe it down with the cannons, but otherwise these guys can deal with everything. One of them, of course, Dragonback Slayers, who synergize with the Iron Drakes as well with their Power of the Dragonback, which, if we check it out, does provide a flammable, so an additional weakness to fire. I'm not entirely sure if that actually overlaps with the Thane here. I don't think it does. It's because it's 2 different weaknesses, but it can overlap and definitely synergize. Finally, unit of Bugman's Rangers here in the back, providing a little bit of additional support, sort of point defense against, say, Night Runners or units like that. Now, as you can see, my opponent went very arty heavy, so immediately I was trying to flex, was trying to get myself into a position where, 1, he couldn't really shell away at my troops, and where I could get my artillery to start counter-battering his artillery. Skaven guns, they'd get a buff to their HP in a recent patch, which definitely makes them a little more of a nuisance. However, they are still not very good in our artillery duels. The simple fact of the matter is, they have huge hitboxes. You can see these guys just tower over everything else. Even the Warp Lightning Cannon, which is a little lower to the ground, very easy target, and it makes them very vulnerable to, sort of, say, Dwarven artillery. So my opponent here, definitely counting on his artillery to carry the day for him. So he's got 4, I think, 3 Plague Claw catapults, 2 Warp Lightning Cannons. So Warp Lightning Cannons, despite, with this much mass, he can obviously kind of suppress my artillery. I've only got 2 cannons and an engineer, so I'm definitely not, don't really have that much of an edge in the arty duel. My opponent did hide an assassin here, and otherwise his front line is basically just built to stall me out. 3 Skaven Slave Spears in the front, 4 Skaven Slaves, or 4 Clan Rat Spears with shields in the middle, and then 3 Stormrune with sword and board in between. And you can see he's immediately pulling them back. Skrulk is in there. He's got his Plague. I think he's actually got 2 rather odd spells, Plague and Pestilent Birth. I don't think either is particularly amazing against Dwarves. Pestilent Birth can be okay, but Plague, really not so much. Aura of Pestilence for that debuff, not bad. Plague Rash, not bad either. Stand Your Ground, also decent, but no Liber Bubonicus, no Rod of Corruption, which honestly, even as a Dwarves, can be okay. And not bringing those debuffs, I think, is a really big mistake, but we'll definitely see how it plays out for my opponent. On the other end, he does have the Assassin with Trophy Heads, Slippery, as well as Smoke Bombs, which of course are actually a free addition to him. You don't have to pay for them. Basically, and never take the Smoke Bombs off. In case you do sometimes do that, don't ever do that. So regardless, you can see I'm sort of inching my way forward. I finally did get my Telestrations reactivated. I kept forgetting to do this, and I also had trouble finding exactly how to do it again. But regardless, you can see we're kind of inching our way forward, and I was trying to get around these trees because I didn't want to be trying to fire through this blob over here. So we're basically just moving along, trying to get to the outside. You can see I'm trying to keep my engineer within somewhat easy distance of the cannons. Now, cannons do outrange all of the Dwarven, or all of the Skaven artillery by a good bit. They outrange warplaning cannons by only 10 meters, but they significantly outrange what are these called? The Plague Claw catapults. And you can see immediately cannon fire coming in, raining down on the warplaning cannon. My opponent, though, counter-battering, so definitely he sees the threat and he starts shooting back at me. And the problem is that although I will get a bunch of buffs here, I made two major mistakes here. One, I didn't move my... you can see ballistics calibration going down. It's going to provide a significant buff to the rate of fire here, improving it by about 4 seconds. And we are immediately going to start wailing away at these warplaning cannons. But big mistake I made, and really something I should have thought of, was pushing my Rune Lord into range here. The Rune Lord is basically immune to these annoying sort of artillery shots, and he himself could have been providing that AoE missile resistance buff, which would have been huge. So you can see I do cast Entrenchment just to get that extra AP, and we are going to start sniping away at these guns. The first warplaning cannon does go down, which is going to leave these two guns there and the warplaning cannon over there. And you can see the Plague Claw catapults definitely raining death and destruction down my Arctic cannons. The Plague Claw catapults do have a leadership debuff on them, so they're going to be doing some nasty hurt here. But you know, the cannons, they're doing a good job in return, and they're going to start sniping these filthy rat guns down. Unfortunately, warplaning cannons not the most inaccurate, and you can see they do pick off a gun here. So what I do start doing, I do start pushing my line forward, figuring that I'm not going to be able to win the artillery duel. And I've been hoping to at least be able to suppress the cannons, and at this point my my view of my chances was kind of dim. I did leave these guys behind, a bit of a mistake. I should start pulling them forward a little bit sooner. Nonetheless, you can see my opponent here raining down on me, trying to knock out the cannons. But with the Rune Lord here, that 15% missile resist, that magic resist, means that even direct hits on the Longbeards are not killing models. That is the power of this stacked missile resistance. You've got, so if we look at, how much does a Plague Claw do? If we look at a Plague Claw catapult, it does 105 AP missile and 45 normal. So you're looking at 150. Now that is being reduced by 40% for the magic resist. Is being reduced by a further 20% from the missile resist. And of course, these guys do have their built-in armor. So the Longbeards, even direct hits, are not really doing all that much. The splash is doing minimal damage. You can see these guys just kind of shrug it off. They lost one Longbeard here, and they're just marching forward, and the guns continue singing. And I actually pulled a Rune Lord back here to provide that additional missile resistance. And you can see this gun here down to one warplaning cannon. And my opponent here actually making a critical mistake trying to snipe down my Rune Lord. Now this is something you should really never be trying to do with warplaning cannons. Now granted, they do have bonus for large, but the Rune Lord, let's look at his stats here. 35% missile resist, 55% magic resist. There's almost nothing going through against him. He's got 90% damage resist against warplaning cannon. It doesn't matter that how much damage you're doing per shot. You're basically doing nothing. So at this point, I'm pushing forward. My opponent is kind of wising up to that. He has at this point lost a warplaning cannon, which is definitely not good. These two cannons are still online, still firing, though it's definitely been costing him a good chunk of ammo. Rune Lord is still in the fight, and I'm trying to push my missiles forward. At first I was thinking about sort of sallying forward with my infantry, but now I'm kind of hesitant. Definitely a little bit of a back and forth here from me. I was being a bit indecisive, perhaps, a bit of a mistake, but my opponent now does decide to sally out with his forces. Perhaps I was also not entirely trusting his ability to win this artillery duel, because Dwarven guns, although I'm focusing very heavily on taking out the warplaning cannons, who I see as the biggest threat, it's definitely not a guarantee here that I could win the artillery duel, and definitely not, obviously I was pretty sure I wouldn't be able to take out all these additional artillery batteries. Now we are able to take the warplaning cannon offline there. You can see another round of buffs coming in from the caster, from the engineer there, which is going to improve these guys a bit. We do hit another cannon with entrenchment, the triple battery of course to get more damage out of it. But now you can see this catapult's doing quite a bit of damage to the Warriors Dragonfire Pass, who are not getting that missile resist buff. These Longbeards over here still not dying, just refusing to go down. But the cannon's also now being forced to fire through the woods, which is also not very good. And you can see that extra HP definitely paying off for that warplaning cannon, which here took, I think, 2 cannon hits, and it does not go down. So it took like 3 cannonballs there, which is more than any other artillery piece would usually require. And so I've decided to sort of just push forward, sort of go all in. We need to deal with this and get it cleared out. My opponent did take a dismount of screws and is pushing them into the fray. You can see the Iron Drakes and the Bogman's Rangers waddling their way up to the front. And my opponent does have this assassin here. I did spot him earlier, but I didn't really choose to engage. I didn't really feel the need to chase after an assassin that I have no chance of catching. So things all in all not looking too terrible. You can see the artillery battery coming in against the Iron Drakes once again doing minimal damage. These guys are just so tanky. Once again they've got those buffs coming in, and my opponent here trying to get some casts with Plague, but that's not going to do too much. Once again these guys just have that magic resist just jacked through the roof, and it's going to make my opponent's army very incapable of doing all that much damage. These Stormermen getting mauled a good bit. You can see I do start peppering in against the Clan Rats and Spears, and we are pushing forward the Long Bridge, moving in to engage. The Thane is hot in pursuit here, just pushing in. Iron Drakes haven't even lost the model yet, and you can see the front line clash is going down. Skaven Slave Spears getting slaughtered by the Longbeards, who of course are going to take minimal damage in that exchange. So my opponent here is finally going to be forced to sort of push in with the Stormermen. You can see in the back here, Bogman's Rangers taking a good chunk of fire. The Assassin here actually getting caught out by Slayers, which is not where he wants to be. Even with Slippery, the Assassin with only 20 armor, I think 30% physical resist, does not hold up all that well. You can see things on fire from the Engineer as well. And so he really doesn't want to be. This is not a place he wants to be in against these Slayers. So he's actually going to be forced to sort of run away. And you can see that in the front line here we are engaging. The Flamethrowers are going to be doing a little bit of roasting. Bogman's Rangers, they're just firing in. And of course the Rune Lord just cycling through all his supporting spells. Rune of Wrath and Ruin earlier did some damage to Stormman, and my opponent here was being very patient, perhaps trying to sort of wait for me to get whittled down. Using his artillery though against these spread out Bogman's Rangers, the problem is that these Plague Claw catapults are just not generating value they need to be generating. Even against units they should normally be good against, just because of all those buffs we've got going. You can see the Assassin here just getting shredded by point blank crossbow fire. He does get into the fray, and you can see the Bogman's Rangers, they're taking a few casualties, but they're not going down immediately. You can see they're definitely not going to go down quietly. You can see the Slayers are going to get in there, and that's going to be a bad time for the Assassin. In the back, the guns are starting to run low on ammo, but you can see we did manage to take a few of those two Warplaning cans are entirely offline, which means that now we can focus on these Plague Claw catapults. And you know, these guys still do have 5 ammo. These guys still have 5 ammo. I think these guys are down to 4, so really, it's still important. We are taking these guns offline, and you know, these cannons have definitely paid for themselves. This one's already out of ammo. This one still has a few rounds left, so that's 3 rounds in its battery. But all in all, we've done a good sort of job just mopping this artillery up. These guys, Plague Claw catapults, I think are 800 apiece. Maybe it's 900 even, because they do have that debuff applied, and they do magic damage, which is usually considered beneficial. Lightning cannons, of course, 1,000 apiece, and these cannons have shut them down. So the Engineer obviously did cost a lot there, but we are pushing in. The Engineer is now going to start sniping away these Stormmen. You can see the Bogman's Rangers and Master of Wrath are just melting these guys. While in the pits, the Iron Drakes are going to start roasting these Stormmen from the flank. You can see they're just delivering some pretty nasty bursts. Never underestimate Iron Drakes against heavy armor. Stormmen, of course, are not the greatest of armor, but you know, these guys will actually roast some of these guys pretty good. You can see the Iron Drakes here lining up, getting their guns ready, and just burning through these poor Skaven. So they are really not having a good day. These Skaven slaves are just not built to stand up to this roasting, and they're actually going to break right at the last second. You can see those brave Dobby Flamethrowers doing their job. An Assassin does leap in, assassinating an Iron Drake, but Iron Drakes do not hold up well to assassin units like this, really. They're pretty bad against it, but I do throw Thane in, and Thane's going to have none of this. He's going to give him the business, and he is going to beat the snot out of this clown who thought he'd be applying pressure. So the Assassin is going to be zoned off here, definitely getting pressured down by the combination of the Thane and the Rune Lord who are pulling back. You can see over the Warriors of Dragon Fire Pass, very badly mauled, but getting rid of these Plague Monks. And in the front line, in the meantime, things definitely stabilizing. Here in the back, Slayers combined with the Bogman's Rangers do manage, and I actually hit the Bogman's Rangers with entrenchment just to give them that physical resist, because I knew they wouldn't be retreating. I figured I'd pincer them between the Slayers and the Bogman's Rangers, and you can see the Stormmen here did get massacred. They are going to get routed off, and yeah, things are definitely looking okay. Now the guns here pushing up. I should have just ordered these guys to drop the guns, but they didn't listen for some reason. So regardless, things definitely looking good. My opponent's army at this point, the backline getting compromised by a horde of angry stunty Slayers. We're just massacring these guys in the pit. The Engineer still sniping away. The Flamethrower is here just roasting through these Stormmen. These guys up to 47 kills, which isn't the most impressive against these Skaven slaves, but now against Stormmen, they're going to start paying for themselves. I do believe it was Turin who was recently listing these guys as one of the worst units in the game, but I actually do think Iron Drakes are okay. I wouldn't rank them as, say, a top unit in the game, but I do think they're decent, and in this sort of situation, they definitely shine. In flank against packed up Stormmen, they're just going to do some explosive work. You can just see those rats getting immolated, just dozens going down there. So that raw power over here, these Stormmen still holding up, but these Stormmen over here hit by Master of Wrath and Ruin. Things just looking really grim. Of course, that debuff from the Thane lowering these guys' defense against fire damage, which means these Iron Drakes are just going to be doing more and more damage, and they're raking in the kills. In the pits, the Rune Lord sliding out with Skrulk. Skrulk, of course, doing magic damage. Not good against the Rune Lord, who has ludicrous defensive values against that. More roasting coming in against Stormwind. These guys up to 77 kills and a lot of damage. And over here, the Dragonback Slayers are actually going to dive into the back line here, which we'll see these guys, of course, going to be tanking in the fire resistance department. Their fire resistance down to 44%, down 44%. So they're basically worse than Treekin against fire. And Iron Drakes having an absolute field day. You can see over here the engineers chasing out the Stormwind. Brave lad, but really at this point it just doesn't matter. It's basically Skrulk and his assassin against the world, essentially, and the rat lines have essentially broken. So good game to my opponent. He was not exactly pleased by the way that artillery duel went, but definitely had a lot of fun here. Now, my big mistake in this game was not using my Rune Lord as a shield for the cannons. Losing that one cannon early was not good. Similarly, I could have perhaps gotten more out of that artillery engagement had I had the Rune Lord in there. Providing that additional missiles and stuff, might have been able to sort of reduce the incoming damage further, reduce the chances of my units coming so close to breaking. One of the gun crews almost routed, which would have been really bad. And so definitely that was a bit of a mistake on my part. But otherwise I was pretty pleased. The cannons doing a huge number on the warplaning cannons that's immediately paying for themselves, and even doing a little bit of damage to the plague claws. Given that I had to invest an engineer into it, I'm not sure it was worth it in the long run. The engineer did some work on his own, of course, but not sure I was that happy with it. I honestly, maybe a third battery of cannons would have probably done me more good than that engineer. Probably would have, to be quite frank. But it was fun to try him out, and I think it was okay. The Longbeards, of course, doing great against Chaff. That's nothing to surprise you there. Warriors, the Thane, Warriors of Dragonfire Pass, the Iron Drakes, I thought that was a pretty good synergy. Of course, the Dragonback Slayers and the Slayers just doing monstrous work as well with cleanup. So all in all, I was pretty pleased with this build. The only thing here that I wasn't too happy about was the Master Engineer, who I think just doesn't really... his buffs just aren't good enough. You're paying over 1,000 for the Master Engineer. And granted, I could have stripped some buffs off of him, but that would have reduced the power of my artillery. Honestly, I think I paid almost 1,200 for him. Maybe even more. I don't know. It was about 1,200 cost. He just didn't really pay for himself. I don't really know what to say there. Probably better off bringing a third gun. If you need to shut down extra armored units, then or enemy artillery, that would have done much better, I think, in this situation. I would have been able to probably focus those warblending cannons down a little quicker, and then moved on and still had enough ammo to shut down those plague claw catapults, and I think that would have been much more valuable. Regardless, good game to my opponent here, Ragnarok. I don't really think this is the most competitive build against Dwarves to begin with. I know people often say you can bring a lot of artillery against Dwarves and get away with it if you spread out enough as a Goblin army. But especially given the magic resistance potential on Dwarves, I'm not the biggest fan of these arty heavy builds. And I personally think that if you're going with, say, Skrulk, and you can go with Skrulk, you can go with some of the mage-oriented Skaven. If you're going to do that, bring armored debuffs, bring poison, bring rat summons, just rush your opponent, pressure them. And my opponent really didn't do that. He was trying to play campy here, and I don't think it really worked out, and I think kind of bit him in the rear. So regardless, good game though. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe below. If you have any comments, any criticism, any questions, anything like that, be sure to share them, and I will do my best to respond as soon as I can. As usual, everybody, I do appreciate you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.